Morning. Several people have commented on the fact that I look very tired today. It's true, it's only been 3 hours sleep, but let's see if I muggle through this. It's certainly inspiring to be here, but the low light doesn't help. Doesn't help. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. But it's a thrill to be standing up here, so that helps. It gets you awake. Now, when you look at social innovations at this stage, if you look at Peak and Care Plus, and as you know, at Ashoka, we can aggregate that to over 3,000 Ashoka fellows now globally in 80 countries. You start to see interesting things when you put all of that together. And I want to share a few observations, really, with you about what we find. Because we find that many social entrepreneurs have become precursors to developments you wouldn't necessarily associate with social projects. And this has been helped by our friends at McKinsey & Company last year. Let's look at a couple of market phenomena that have emerged over the past 10, 20 years that most of you know, and the numbers that are associated with them. Fair trade is now globally worth $4.8 billion globally. Car sharing, $5.6 billion, growing 20% to 30% every year depending on market. 10 billion peer-to-peer lodging, Airbnb and couch surfing and other such alternative hotels. $36 billion in open education that tears down the traditional walls to universities that are defined by limited access, paying, and so forth. $47 million alone in Germany is decentralized green energy that's no longer supplied by central big power plants, but by solar panels on people's roofs or by the decentralized energy that's being fed into the grid. $62 billion in organic and slow food growing quickly. And here's the really big one, $900 billion in mobile banking is the turnover today. Now, if you think of all these innovations as fast-growing market phenomena of the past 10 years, and I would argue some of these really define where the economy is going. So these have been headlines of all the major business newspapers around the world. You can really think of them as being steep up on an S-curve. It starts slow, then it takes off really quick, the innovation, builds a market, then it plateaus off for the next innovation. We're in the middle of a number of these S-curves that are really exciting. Now, why am I talking about big market shifts? Because when you look at them through the lens that we have, you see at the beginning of the S-curve a couple of interesting friends. These are all organizations started by Ashoka Fellows, and they have triggered every single one of the markets I've just outlined. Let's just go into some of them. Couchsurfing is the first innovation founded by Ashoka Fellow Casey Fenton that established the idea that you wouldn't necessarily have to sleep at an expensive hotel, but you could find each other over the internet to sleep at each other's couch. Slow food has been started by an Italian fellow, Ashoka Fellow Carlo Petrini. Kiva, I think the representative for the Middle East is now in the room here. Kiva has been started by an Ashoka Fellow to enable people to lend each other money peer-to-peer directly over vast distances for their projects, rather than people having to go to a bank. You've got fair trade. You've got the University of the People that provides free online degrees for everyone, for anyone, anywhere in the world. You've got the EWS, which is a German energy company started by a mother of four, a social entrepreneur 30 years ago after Chernobyl, pioneering the idea that everybody could feed in energy into a grid rather than having been provided by a couple of big power plants. That is now the blueprint for the energy policy of most major economies. And Wikipedia, of course, founded by Ashoka Fellow Jimmy Wales, that has redefined how we think about knowledge. So these are at the beginning, I would argue, of these S-curves. When almost nothing's happening, something triggers the potential for a market, and then we see these massive shifts. Now, when we look at these markets and what triggered them, what helped them take off, we see three mechanisms. Mechanisms that really, in a way, define the core business principles of many social entrepreneurs. everyone is a value creator. You don't have one central player sort of defining, you are a customer, I'm going to sell you the product, your only option is to buy the product, and really making you a part in everything you can do in what's going to happen, whether it's as a co-creator, whether it's as a co-distributor, whether it's as a knowledge creator. We have so many more people today than we ever had, with healthier, better educated, better networked, with longer lives in the world than anywhere before. And social entrepreneurs and these big markets that are triggered by them use everybody in so many more roles than the simple role of the paying customer. Secondly, they create markets beyond the self-interest. If you look at Wikipedia, it's an interesting example. It's a tiny organization, but it's enabled this massive ecosystem around it. It's actually really, really small, but it enabled everybody else to become a player. These are markets that operate for the good of all. And third, and this is interesting for the financing, we used to think of, on the one end, we have commercial business, the point of which being making money. On the other end, we've got social projects that improve people's lives. Now, these markets are really defined by hybrid profit models, many of them. Models that can take very long to pay off, much, much longer than typical commercial ideas, or that are permanently helped by philanthropy, or, and this is the most interesting bit, by a resource that people provide free of charge. Think of Wikipedia, for example. Now, you could say this has always happened in world history, and Matthias has pointed to some of the early examples of social entrepreneurs creating big markets like Raiffeisen. But the big difference is this used to happen over many, many decades. You know, you had an idea, and then 50 years later, you'd at some point have a viable market. These phenomena that I've just shared with you now, they've emerged over a couple of years. You know, Wikipedia was founded 2003. Couchsurfing was founded 2006. Most of the distributed energy organizations have been in the 1990s. This now happens within a couple of years. It's absolutely amazing to see. Now, if we zoom in to these steep S-curves that define where our business world is going, triggered by social innovation, we may see, hopefully, in the future, more of a collaboration between the big markets and the entrepreneurs in the beginning. Because really, if you can see that these shifts are happening, you could, and I think that's the challenge for us going forward, define mechanisms for how to help more social entrepreneurs, more ideas for the good of all, break through earlier. Not purely by philanthropy, but by all the mechanisms we know in the business world, in the government world, to help innovations succeed more quickly. So we're hoping to see hybrid value systems. We're beginning to see hybrid value systems where commercial players and non-profit players come together very early on to realize these markets much more quickly than they would have happened. And to me, and this is what I would love to discuss this afternoon, this whole story about the fast-changing world with the lines between business markets, commercial markets, and social innovation becoming blurred, the whole point about that I'd like to discuss is, what does that mean for us as a community that's interested in support in making great ideas successful? Are we still right to think of the sectors in the way we did? Are we still right to separate out philanthropy on the one end and investing on the other end? Are we still right to engage and volunteer for a social cause and then find our careers in the commercial world? Aren't these paradigms really much, much faster converging into one world that works for the good of all than we all realize? And how can we be a part of that? That's going to be the discussion this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to more of these summits to see how quickly we can progress, especially in Turkey, with coming up this type of S-curve much, much faster than I think pretty much anywhere else in Europe right now. So it's exciting to be here and discuss with you. Thank you.